Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Well, today I want to talk all about my favorite flower, at least my favorite flower to grow inside, especially during the cold winter months, and that is Amaryllis. Now, I started a lot of Amaryllis really early this season. The ones you see blooming now, I started late October. The first picture I took was October 22nd, so somewhere that week I started them, but you can see a lot of them are blooming now. This beautiful, magical touch Amaryllis that has almost cherry red petals with a green throat and a white margin. Then just yesterday, my Cape Horn started to bloom, which is a pink with kind of a white star in the center. The Magnum has been blooming for a while now, and I have lots of other ones that are progressing through different stages. So I thought it would just be fun to just talk all about Amaryllis today because I grew up with Amaryllis being a big part of the holiday season, and I want to carry on that tradition here in our home. So the Amaryllis bulb that I'm going to be planting today is called Single Rosy Star, and Amaryllis are sold by centimeters. You might see that if you're looking online. I bought all my bulbs from Longfield Gardens this year, and this is a 34-36 centimeter bulb, which is a great size bulb to plant because the bigger the bulb, the more flower stalks you're going to have. So this bulb will I can actually see into the bulb right now because it's already started to grow in the bag. I can actually see 3 flower stalks present. So I'm going to get at least 3 flower stalks off this 34-36 centimeter bulb, and that'll be a really good show. And you can also see this bulb has started to put off offshoots, which if I want to in later years, I can actually take these off and just propagate them via what's called an offset. These are called offsets. So when you're looking for an Amaryllis bulb, you want to go for at least 34 centimeters, I would say. 36 is awesome. 38 is really great if you can get your hands on them, but they are sometimes a little more difficult to acquire. And the other thing to think about is, when do you want your Amaryllis to be blooming? If it's the middle of November and you want them to be blooming for Christmas, you definitely want to get an Amaryllis that's grown in the southern hemisphere, places like Peru and South Africa, because those Amaryllis are going to bloom approximately 4 to 6 weeks after they wake up, whereas bulbs grown in the northern hemisphere, such as Holland, will take sometimes 6 to even 12 weeks to wake up and bloom. And most of the time you're going to see these bulbs labeled as Christmas flowering, early flowering, and some places will actually label the country of origin. So like for the Cape Horns, they actually had Peru right there on the packaging, and that was really helpful. And the reason why there's a big difference in bloom time is because an Amaryllis, oh, here comes Grace, an Amaryllis will bloom with its country of origin. So when it's winter here in America, it's actually summer in Peru. But when it's winter in Holland, it's also winter here in America. So that's why your bulbs grown in the southern hemisphere bloom and, more importantly, wake up quicker than those grown in the northern hemisphere. So this bulb that was grown in Peru is actually geared up and ready to bloom right now because it's been in holding and it thinks it's summer. It thinks that it is time to bloom right now. So I hope I was able to explain that in a way that's easy to understand. So now let's move on to how to pot up an Amaryllis. You can grow Amaryllis either in soil or water. I tend to prefer to grow my Amaryllis in soil, and I like to use a pot that has a drainage hole. So this is a 6.8-inch terracotta pot. It has one big drainage hole at the bottom. You can grow them in a vessel that doesn't have drainage, but if you do that, go ahead and invest in some activated charcoal. I buy this on Amazon. It's about $9, I think. You can probably get it at the pet store also. This is normally used in aquariums, but this will help your soil or your water if you're growing Amaryllis in water over stones. It will help the water and the soil not to get stinky if there's no drainage available. But if you've never grown an Amaryllis before, I would advise doing it in soil with a drainage hole because it's a little more forgiving because the water will drain out if you tend to overwater things. So What's really great is that an amaryllis doesn't need any pre-chilling. It doesn't need a period of time in the dark, in the cold, anything like that. A lot of other bulbs that we grow inside, they have to go through a chilling period or a dormancy period, but the amaryllis is just ready to plant and grow. So I've got my pot filled halfway full of potting soil, and the amaryllis actually really appreciates a pot that's pretty tight. So when I stick my amaryllis bulb in here, I'm looking for about an inch or two between the edge of the bulb and the edge of my vessel, because they really do like a snug fit. They're really not going to grow that many roots. It's really kind of interesting to pull an amaryllis out after its first growing season and see how little roots they often have. So once I have my bulb in there, I have just some more pre-moistened potting soil right here, and I'll just fill in all around the bulb. And what we want to do is leave what's called the shoulders and the neck of the bulb exposed. That's the way these guys like to be planted. So I'll just fill in all around. And amaryllis nowadays come in so many different colors. I mean, it's really so exciting. You don't have to go with just that standard red, white, and of course that really popular red and white one called Minerva, which I love all of those and I grow them all. But if you kind of want to go outside the norm, you can look for a lot of beautiful pinks, corals, peaches, one with different edges, margins, streaking. There's doubles that are really beautiful. The doubles are really great for cutting. But you know, just look around, because I think once you see how many different amaryllis varieties there are on the market days, you'll get really excited, and maybe like me, you'll want to start an amaryllis collection. So we've got the amaryllis nestled in the pot. The shoulders and the neck are exposed, or we could basically just say leave about a third of the bulb exposed. Now take some water, and amaryllis appreciate tepid water or even slightly warm water. These guys are warm, loving bulbs. We'll just water around the perimeter of the bulb. And we'll water it in nicely, but not too much. I like to put a label in since I grow a lot of different varieties. That way I don't forget what's what. So this is the single rosy star. I'll put this in here. And then if you like, you can go ahead and top dress it with something. Maybe you want to do pine cones, moss. I have some preserved moss here, and I think that will look really beautiful on top. You could also put in some evergreen from outside just for something to look at right away. Maybe some pine and some holly branches and some red twig dogwood. You know, you can really just get so creative when growing amaryllis. So now what I'll do is put this in a bright, warm location to wake up and start growing. And then I'll water it about a fourth of a cup of water once a week, once there is about 2 to 3 inches of growth coming from the bulb. But at this stage, after we've just watered it in and set it on maybe a radiator or a warm spot in our kitchen or something like that, we don't need to water it again until we see those 2 inches of growth. And then over time, you'll start to see the bloom stalks emerge, which is so exciting. I mean, I feel like, you know, the amaryllis is almost the advent calendar of flowers, because you can just come down each morning with this eager anticipation to see how much your amaryllis have grown. I know there's some people that even kind of measure the growth on their amaryllis each day and document that. I think that's super fun. And when you take a look at an amaryllis bulb, you can see that the blooms come from the outer edges of the bulb. Sometimes it will put off another bloom stalk here from the center, but the leaves always come from the center. So this is one that has been growing for a few weeks now. Now, if you run into this issue, don't worry too much at all. You see how this amaryllis is growing? The window is here on this amaryllis, and so it's been growing towards the light, but don't worry about that at all. Just give it a little bit of a turn and it will correct itself really quickly within a day or two. Now, once your amaryllis starts blooming, and look at this one. If you can order a magical touch, And I think they're sold out on the Longfield website, but do some searching because this magical touch is absolutely phenomenal. But once they start blooming, you want to go ahead and move them to a cool location because the blooms will last longer if they are kept cooler. If I were to keep this on a radiator at this point, the blooms would fade faster because of all that heat coming off the radiator. So the heat's really good to get them started, get them growing, but once they bloom, go ahead and move them to a cool location and, a location where you can really enjoy them. These two Cape Horns I have on our dining room table. The Magical Touch I have over in my little gardening reading nook. Then I have the Magnum also over on that reading nook. And there's really a lot of other cool things that you can do with the amaryllis. You don't just have to stick with one amaryllis bulb in a pot, although that's glorious all on its own. I showed a video of this the other day. I had given one to a friend, and this is one I'm keeping for myself. This is just a moss-wrapped amaryllis, and you just take the amaryllis bulb, wrap it in sheep moss, and then you submerge just the base of the bulb into water about once a week, and the moss will just drink the water up and it will bloom like this. And I think this is a really fun way to grow amaryllis. You could put this maybe on a crystal dish, maybe you could put it on a candlestick. I actually have mine in an urn, which maybe is weird because then it still seems like it's potted up, but I kind of like it. Let me show you another idea. Here's one where I planted 3 amaryllis amongst some house plants and also just some cuttings of house plants that will root as these amaryllis kind of get going and take off. So I have a beautiful fern, some ivy, a cyclamen, and you can see one amaryllis here, another here, another here. And this sansevieria, this is just cuttings, that I stuck into the soil. And these will root just fine. But you could also put in like some moth orchids or even a poinsettia so that the arrangement looks like it's blooming before the amaryllis start to take off and bloom themselves. You can enjoy the blooms from something else. And now since amaryllis really don't want that much water, if you do have something that has specific watering needs that maybe don't match the amaryllis, instead of planting that, I would just sink the pot in. That way when it needs water, you can pull it out and water it separately and then sink it back into your design. And then I just put some holly berries in here too, because why not? Just for fun. I just think it's fun to get creative with amaryllis. Let me show you a really big one that's going to bloom probably in late January. So this project doesn't look like much yet, but I hope that my vision will come to life about maybe late January, I'm guessing. So in October, I planted this up. So you can see the difference between bulbs that came over from Holland and those that came from Peru or South Africa. So these have been in here for about 6 weeks now, going on 6 weeks. This is a window box I got from Lowe's. It doesn't have any drainage, so I did go ahead and sprinkle in some activated charcoal to start. And then I just planted up 5, I think these are called Double King Amaryllis. They're a double red, and I thought they were just so beautiful, and I thought they would be a really great show all together. But what I want to do is once these guys are actively growing, I'm going to put white pine all around here, and then come in with arborvitae, and then tons and tons of winterberry holly, and then I have big pine cones that I'm going to glue onto sticks and put those all around also for what I hope will be just a really spectacular display. So that's another thing you can do is just plant up some amaryllis, whether it be one amaryllis or a lot, and then put in a bunch of greenery and berries and red twig dogwood. If you're gifting that to someone, it's almost like you're gifting them a fresh evergreen container, and then they can be pleasantly surprised when they have this amaryllis blooming in, a month or 2. That's a really fun gift. So now let's talk about what to do with your amaryllis after it's done blooming and how to get it to rebloom the next year. I do have a separate video on this where I walk you through the process throughout an entire year with a Minerva amaryllis, but I'll show you here as well. So this is my Magnum. You can see this flower is pretty much on its way out. Probably if I had it here in my house and I wasn't taking this video, I would leave this flower another day or 2, but once a flower is finished, you can just go ahead and just pop it right off. Watch out, sometimes the pigment on this amaryllis, on especially the red colors, they will stain your hands. But just pop them off as they're done. And then once the whole stalk is done, you can cut the stalk down to 1 inch. And then you want to go ahead and continue to treat the amaryllis, and basically you'll just have the leaves remaining as a house plant. Keep it warm, keep it in a bright area all through the winter and the spring. And then what you can do if you like is you can take it outside around the same time you would plant out your tomatoes, your dahlias. You can go ahead and transfer either the pot outside and grow the pot on outside. You can sink the pot into the ground. You can take the amaryllis out and plant it into the ground, whatever you prefer and whatever is best for your particular environment. And what I really mean by environment is that this is something that I wish was talked a little bit more about in books, because it's something that I kind of had to learn the hard way, is that if you're in an area, at least like myself, where you get a lot of rain, say you have soil that really never really dries out. You don't really have to water things because you're always getting rain multiple times a week. Your soil's always wet when you stick your hand into the ground. I don't think it's a good idea to plant the amaryllis directly in the ground in that case, because like we said, at the beginning, they really don't want that much water. And for the bulb to just sit in wet soil all growing season, I've found to be a consistent and constant issue for me every time I attempt to rebloom an amaryllis. So what I find works best for me is to actually keep them in their pots or just transfer them to a pot that's a little bit bigger, and then grow them outside that way. But I think that really is dependent on your environment. If you live in a really dry climate, you probably could stick them right into the ground. I can really only speak to what works best for me here in this area, where 60 inches of rainfall over the growing season is very normal. So you're gonna grow this outside as long as you can, but then what you want to do is take it inside about 2 to 3 months before you want to take it out of dormancy. So this is the part where I think gets a little bit confusing. So I'm just gonna tell you exactly what I do. I leave mine outside until the very end of August, and at that point, I bring the pot inside, I put it into my basement, I completely stop watering it, no more water at all, and our basement is about 50 degrees. So dark, 50 degrees, and most importantly, no water. And what will happen is the leaves will die back naturally and the bulb will go into dormancy. And it's really important not to water the bulb during this time, because this is when the bulb creates its blooms for next year. Inside the bulb is still working hard building that bloom. So you leave it in dormancy for 2 to 3 months. 2 is what I always do, and it's always worked out so far for me. Then you just bring the bulb up from the basement. You can either plant it in fresh potting soil if you like, or you can just leave it in the potting soil that it's in. Then you're gonna give it 1 drink of water, put it back in that warm, bright environment, 70 degrees, and it'll be like starting all over again with a fresh bulb. And for me, they've always rebloomed when doing this method. I've heard some variations on this method, but that is what's always worked for me. But what you're really going for is that you want the leaves to get as much sun to feed the bulb for next year, and then you want that dormancy period where they don't have any water. And I think this can get a little bit confusing because you do see a little bit of variance in information on this, and that's probably because different things work for different people. So some experimentation is good and beneficial as well, because my thought on gardening is the right way to do something is the way that works for you. But hopefully sharing what works for me will help somebody out there. And I think what also is confusing, that was confusing for me, is like when exactly to remember to put the bulb into dormancy and to take it out. Think of it like this. When would you plant up a brand new amaryllis bulb? If you would want to be planting up a brand new amaryllis bulb on Thanksgiving, count back 2 months. That's when you want to be sticking your bulb down in the basement to go into dormancy. At least 2 months, 3 to be safe. But like I say, what I always do is this. Cut the bloom stalks down to 1 inch. Treat it as a houseplant, warm, bright light, keep it watered. Take it outside when you would plant out your tomatoes. Keep it watered if you don't get enough rain. In late August, take it down into a dark, cool cool place, 50 degrees. Don't water it anymore. It's going to die back naturally. That's what it's supposed to do. 2 months from then, bring it up out of dormancy, plant it up in new potting soil, give it some water, give it some sun and warmth, and it will bloom again. So, hopefully that's not too confusing. Let me know in the comments section if you have any questions. But like I said, I do have a video solely dedicated to reblooming a Minerva over the course of about a year and 3 months. Well guys, I think that brings me to the end of this video on Amaryllis. I hope it was helpful in one way or another, and I hope if you've never grown an Amaryllis before, you'll give it a try. The bulb, the bulbs can be a little bit more on the expensive side. I've heard that, said before. But the way I think of it is it's a house plant and then it will bloom again for many, many years. So when I think of the bulbs in terms of that, I feel like it really is a worthwhile investment. And I think I love them so much because they flower exactly when I am in desperate need of something flowering. In fact, there's a window right behind the camera and right now it's snowing. So, to be able to look outside and see it snowing, but then look over next to me, in my chair there and see all of these Amaryllis in different stage of growth and blooming, it just reminds me that there's still life to be nurtured, and it's just something to look forward to. I think that's what's hard about the winter is, we're just eagerly anticipating, starting seeds, watching the bulbs come out of the ground. But if you plant Amaryllis, you can watch that throughout November, December, January, February, why not? And you can hold some bulbs over too. You don't have to plant them all at once. So guys, I think I'll wrap up the video here because I could just talk about Amaryllis forever because I love them so much. As a matter of fact, I happened to order some more last night because I think I really just have a problem. I think I have a problem. I'm gonna have to tell my husband no Christmas presents. I've already bought myself 10 more Amaryllis bulbs. Well, I hope you guys have a great day. Until next time, happy gardening. Bye.